same volumes of cocaine in the US market. And ergo, we have a spike in kidnappings and extortion in some of the organized crime syndicates muscling their way into the lucrative business of human trafficking, for example. So again, levels of violence have risen. And more importantly, what the drug traffickers in Mexico have decided to do is, if I can't get drugs onto the other side of the border, I'll start creating an internal demand for those drugs in Mexico. So Mexico has gone from being basically a transit, in the case of cocaine, or production country, in the case of marijuana, to also being a country that is facing increasing spikes in the demand for illicit drugs, because it is being artificially created by the drug traffickers to generate business and revenue, which has been affected by the cooperation between Mexico and the United States in shutting down the flow of cocaine coming through Mexico into the United States. And you can see the effectiveness of the strategy by simply looking at what ONDCP, the Office of National Drug Control Policy of the White House, calls or designates the high-intensity drug trafficking areas. It divides the U.S. territory into, I don't know how many they are, but it divides them into several high-intensity drug trafficking areas. For each one of these areas, it looks at emergency room admissions, the price and the purity of drugs on the streets, how many people have been incarcerated because of drug-related felonies, and they do a map of what's going on in the United States in terms of drugs. You will not be surprised to hear that in the last year, in every single high-intensity drug trafficking area in the United States, we've seen a 102% increase in the price of cocaine and a 34.2% decrease in the purity of cocaine. Because what is happening on the Mexico-Guatemala border and in the Mexican territory is having a profound effect on the availability of cocaine in the US market. And this has happened in every single area in the United States except one, the Pacific Northwest. Why? Because the drug traffickers that don't have to deal with congressional committees or with interagency task forces or with engaging civil society or public opinion are much faster and nimbler in responding than we are as governments. And they have very quickly modified their routes of trafficking, their patterns of trafficking into the United States via maritime routes that are coming into the Canadian side of the border or the Pacific Northwest of the United States. And that's why in that part of the US, you have not seen these variations in price and purity of cocaine. As we go forward, what are the key areas of operations that Mexico and the United States are looking at? There's one first chunk, which is the region between Colombia and southern Mexico, because a lot of the trafficking routes of cocaine are now coming up via maritime routes or into Central America, and from there into the Caribbean region. The second one, for obvious reasons, is the northern tier of Mexico and the southern tier of the United States, the border region written at large, because that is either where the staging ground for the introduction of drugs into the United States on the Mexican side is taking place, or where the gun shows, the gun shops, or the money laundering operations bringing bulk cash into Mexico from the United States are taking place. It's that chunk of the border on both sides that our law enforcement agencies are working on to dismantle the operations of the drug syndicates, to deny them safe haven, to deny them visas, to deny them the ability to cross back and forth along our border. And the last one, the last staging ground, or the key area of operation, is for obvious reasons, what I told you, the Western Pacific and the Eastern Caribbean, because that is where we've seen a lot of the trafficking routes redirected. What are the key deliverables for both countries in the short term? We need to gain intel superiority. We need to maintain operational security. We need to maximize the effectiveness of our special forces. We need to intelligently use the fixed and rotary wing capabilities that Congress has approved as a result of the administration's efforts to provide Mexican authorities with the ability to provide endgame. That is, when you pass on intelligence that a Mexican special unit can arrive at precisely the time that it needs to arrive to arrest or to intercept a shipment of drugs. Upholding the rule of law, critically important, winning the public support on both sides of the border for what we're doing. We need to ensure that our two societies are co-stakeholders in this fight that our two governments are waging against organized crime. Because if public opinion does not understand, and we do not explain to public opinion what's at stake, we will lose the support of public opinion on both sides of the border. And we need it as a critical component of our efforts to continue deepening our engagement. We need to continue rebuilding and strengthening institutions, and we need to sustain our efforts in force projection so that we can continue the levels of attrition that we have triggered against the drug syndicates. As we look to what we've achieved these past 3 years through the MEDI initiative, both our countries are looking to continue deepening the work on 4 key pillars. The first one is disrupting the operational capacity of organized crime. The second is institutionalizing